Less than 24 hours after the new chair of the Equalities Commission said we should be kinder to migrants, well, this happened. This was the arrest of two Islamic State-inspired terrorists who were found guilty today of plotting what police said would have been the worst terrorist act in British history on Jewish communities. Walid Sadal, 38, from Wigan, and Ammar Hussein, 52, who lived in Bolton, wanted to replicate the 2015 Paris terror attacks in revenge for Israeli assaults on Gaza. They bought assault rifles, handguns, hundreds of rounds of ammo for a suicide attack where they wanted to kill as many members of the Jewish community as they could and hoped to become martyrs. And let me tell you, nothing was off limits. They sized up Jewish shops, synagogues and, even this makes my blood run cold tonight, schools and nurseries. And they were only busted when intelligence services found out about their plan and deployed an undercover cop called Farouk to pretend to help them. So who were they? Well, Walid Sadal is a former hotel entertainer who originally came from Tunisia, who married an English woman and moved to Britain in 2012. Ammar Hussein, his accomplice, is a former Iraqi soldier who'd claimed to be from Kuwait. The CPS said he'd had military training and was a known follower of Islamic State. It's not reported when or how he arrived in the UK. Both men were fuelled by a sick desire to carry out a repeat of Hamas's October the 7th attack on Israel, and Sadal lurked around Manchester's Jewish neighbourhoods, scouting out schools, nurseries and shops as he planned his massacre. He told Farouk, the undercover cop, "My blood is boiling. We're going to carry out the operation in August. Brothers from inside the Islamic State, they'll help us." By May 2024, last year, after all their reconnaissance trips, Hussein and Sadal believed they were about to receive a huge cache of guns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition from Farouk outside a hotel in Bolton to carry out their attack. Well, Sadal was caught red-handed. The guns, unknown to him, they'd been deactivated, and what would have been one of the worst terrorist attacks in British history had thankfully been foiled. Well, let's be clear about what's going on in Britain today, shall we? Actually, it's been going on in Britain for decades now. Islamism is a cancer that's been allowed to spread completely unchecked thanks to an insane open border policy that even the Trump administration accurately describes as suicidal empathy. There are thousands more jihadis just like these delinquents operating right now in Britain, I can tell you. I've heard of many foiled terror plots from acquaintances who work in the security services and counter-terror which will never reach the light of day, and the details will shock you to the core. This incident was a near miss. There have been plenty more near misses too. And there have also been plenty more that slipped through the net. 7/7, Lee Rigby, Manchester Arena, London Bridge 2017, I was there, London Bridge 2019, Westminster Bridge, the Liverpool hospital bombing, and of course, just this year, the Manchester synagogue attack. And that's just in Britain. I dread to think that one day soon, we'll be on the receiving end of another attack that really will shock this nation to the core. Ex-Tory Security Minister Tom Tugendhat posted on X earlier, "People whose names will never be known found the information that stopped these murderers. The heroism of MI5 is often, rightly, unnoticed. We need to be honest about the threat. Islamist ideas, inspired by Muslim Brotherhood ideology, are a threat to everyone in the UK. Jews are just the first in line." Well, Tom is right. Our counter-terror and security services are indeed heroes, and I thank them. But why don't we thank them properly and make their lives a hell of a lot easier by stopping these nutters coming into the UK in the first place? On the face of it, it seems as though these two were living here legally, but there have also been foiled terror attacks plotted by people who arrived in this country by small boat. More than 40,000 have entered this year alone. It's insane. Why the small boats invasion hasn't been declared a national emergency by now is, in my book, nothing but negligence and contempt for the British public. Ask yourself tonight, how many more murders, rapes, slaughters must we endure before our politicians finally do their first and most important job of all, which is protecting this land and its people?
This interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN and their massive Christmas deal. Right now, you can get up to 80% off ExpressVPN. Every time you jump online to grab a last-minute gift, there's someone out there trying to grab your card details and passwords. ExpressVPN puts an encrypted shield between you and the cybercriminals, so you can protect your privacy, money, and identity. But hurry, this deal ends on the 26th of December, so scan the QR code or click the link in the description now.
Let's get the thoughts now of my panel tonight. The External Affairs Officer at the Free Speech Union, Connie Shaw, the political commentator, Jonathan Liss, and the writer and broadcaster, Candice Holdsworth. Good evening, panel. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Candice, I'll start with you. When are we going to get serious about Islamism in the UK?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's been 10 years since the Bataclan attack, which I think was very formative for me as a young journalist. I realised that we were entering an era of violent Islamism and violent terror, and I think all of us noticed at the time that our elites and our leaders were not able to name the threat. They couldn't talk about it. They couldn't say exactly what it was. And I remember listening to one of the widows of one of the men who was killed in the Bataclan attack, and she said in all the inquiries afterwards, no one ever said what was the ideology that killed him. No one could get to grips with it. And 10 years later, it's still happening, and people are still coming into this country. They're not being vetted properly. They often come from countries with long histories of violent extremism and violence against Jews. And I think going forward, we need to be doing what I think they're doing in the US, and I think they're doing really, really well, which is really, really, really analysing who is coming in, vetting them, and not just letting anyone in.
Well, that's another whole can of worms. So not only are they dealing with, I've been there for the past 4 months, illegal migration by boosting people out and closing the border, as any sane country should, they are talking about re-migration as well. People who have been in the country for maybe decades, who came here on green cards or certain visas. And these guys in particular, one of them came in 2012. He married a British woman, Connie, and he had all this time trying to assimilate. We're told that multiculturalism is great for integration and everybody gets on. He'd been here for a very long time and yet still wanted to carry out what police described as what would have been the worst terrorist attack in British history.
These conversations are difficult enough to have, you know, when you're just talking about Islamists and people who come here from countries where Islamism is a dominant ideology. What's even harder to talk about is the fact that second-generation immigrants, there's an issue there as well. If you look at some of the terrorist attacks we've had over the last few years, David Amos, that was a second-generation immigrant, the 2020 Streatham terrorist, London Bridge in 2019, Lee Rigby, 2007 terrorists in London and Glasgow, and 7/7. They weren't people who came here from abroad. They were people who were born in this country and had parents who came from elsewhere. According to Henry Jackson polling, only 24% of British Muslims have a negative view of Hamas. This is a really difficult conversation.
24%?
So 1 in 4 British Muslims have a negative
When's that
view
poll
of Hamas.
from, do you know?
I'm not sure. It was after it's between October 7th and now. I'm not sure the exact date, but it's obviously within the last 2 years. This is Henry Jackson Society poll. It's almost unbelievable.
Re-migration then? Are we getting into the realms of re-migration now?
That word scares me. I think
Jonathan's screwing his face up.
Go on, Jonathan.
What's
Carry on.
That word scares me, but I don't know what the solution is. But it scares me to think that, based on those numbers, it wouldn't be an unreasonable assertion that there will be a considerable amount of British Muslims in this country who may be disappointed that this attack was foiled.
Jonathan, what scares you more, the term re-migration or the potential of the worst British terrorist attack in our history?
That's an outrageous question, Ben. As a Jewish person, obviously, I'm horrified by this kind of thing. I know people who would have been at these protests. I am under no illusions about the threat we face. I do security duty twice a year at my institute, wearing a high-vis vest and stab vest. I am not under any illusions about the dangers that Jewish people face. But re-migration, Connie, you're absolutely right to be scared by the word, because it is scary, it's horrific. What you are the implication of that word is that you are going to be taking people based on their ethnicity and driving them out of the country that is their only country they've ever lived in. That is what people mean when they talk about migration. Let's just own the position. That's what people, when people start talking about re-migration, that's where it leads. That is where it leads, Ben.
That's not accurate. One of these guys came from Tunisia in 2012. I guess he had leave to remain or was granted, you know, he became a citizen. Those kind of people will be in the conversation.
When people talk about the words, and Connie's already pointed out that there are people who are British born, they've lived in this country their whole lives, and they've been radicalised online and, you know, by various groomers or whatever it might be. Re-migration is nonsense. That is talking about it's about getting rid of people based on their ethnicity. Obviously, this is a problem. That re-migration, where are you going to send them to? Under what law could there possibly be a justification?
Sending them back to their origin. origin. So
well,
in this case, the Tunisian guy would have gone back to Tunisia.
Like in the United States, you certainly cannot deport US citizens from the United States because they're US citizens. And I don't think that we should be following Trump's lead on anything related to this particular issue, given how illegally ICE is behaving in numerous cases in the United States and is subject to multiple legal cases. So
how they behaved illegally, ICE?
Look, well, there are numerous sort of court cases in people sort of going and arresting US citizens based on the colour of their skin and just some disgusting.
They're then released.
Then what is happening? Look, let's talk about what's happening in this country, because this is, I think, more important than what's happening in the United States. And in this
kind of the same argument, because we are facing not just individual isolated country issues. It is an attack on the West by Islamists, and I'll say it again, Islamism is a cancer, not just on this nation, it's on the America, in Australia, as we saw with Bondi. It is an attack on the West by those who don't share our values.
Ben, there are many...
That's why, by the way, that's why President Trump is sending out memos and cables to all European embassies, including Great Britain, saying, sort your issue out with migration, both legal and illegal, or in 20 years your countries you won't recognise your culture.
Well,
your civilization won't be there.
That is what Trump and the United States are talking about is white nationalism and sort of making Europe white again and all this stuff. It's not about a credible threat. Of course, there is a credible threat, and we have to deal with it. But talking about remigration is just pandering to the worst people on the far right.
One more question before I come back to you, Candice. How do we deal with it then? Because the attempts thus far, have been completely null and void. We can list off dozens of Islamist terror attacks in the UK across the West. London Bridge 2017, I was there. 2019, Westminster Bridge, Lee Rigby, 7/7, it goes on and on. So something's not working. What do we need to change?
Look, these are very, very complicated questions. I'm not denying that for a second. It comes from sort of de-radicalisation, education.
Well, that doesn't work, does it?
Well, look, Ben, clearly there are going to be people in this country who are seeing what's going on in the world and are mixing with the wrong people and are going online. Remember the Bondi Beach attack? Apparently, he was in his room. He barely left the house, according to his mother. Obviously that was a lot of online radicalisation that was happening.
You keep saying online, but we know that there are many mosques who are preaching hatred, and many of them are also registered charities, and the Charity Commission hasn't done anything about them. We've seen lots of evidence of that. I think this is to me another example of obfuscating what the issue is. We know that there are mosques in this country preaching exactly what happened, or what these two guys wanted to go.
So, Candice, ask again, something's not working. Whatever the tactic is by the people who are meant to look after us and prioritise the safety of British people and Islam, it's not working. Whatever they're doing, it doesn't work because it keeps happening again and again and again. So what should we do?
Absolutely. Well, for me, it's what I just said. I would have a very, very, very high bar to coming into this country. I think people are let in here way too easily. I'm sure if you analyse most of their social media feeds, you'd find dodgy posts, which is what they're doing in the US. ICE is analysing social media feeds. Another disturbing aspect is that, you see, one of these terrorists who was planning all these attacks in Manchester was on universal credit whilst he was plotting these...
It's almost comical.
But he had loads of money in savings, which he was using to purchase weapons. Why didn't we find out about that? What is going on? Most of them are unemployed whilst they're doing these things. And I think that the whole benefit system needs to be overhauled in this aspect
we literally
as well.
did find out about it, thankfully.
Well, through social media. But why did he have over £100,000 in his savings account, but was claiming universal credit?
And they found 75 grand's worth of cash in one of their houses, buried under some sort of makeshift safe in the floor. Yeah, I don't know, Jonathan. Look, I don't know if the answer is remigration, but I seem to be, in America, President Trump seems to be the only people offering some sort of suggestion. Otherwise, we just keep plodding on as we are, and we keep saying thoughts and prayers, and people keep getting slaughtered and murdered at the hands of Islamists.
No, the only people saying thoughts and prayers are right-wing Americans when people get murdered in schools, Ben. Certainly that's not an appropriate response to when these things are happening. And as I say, once again, I am completely horrified by this. I'm incredibly grateful that this attack was stopped. It chills my blood to think about it. The answers are very, very complicated, but these are people, in a lot of these people, as we said once again, are people who grew up here. What do you suppose? These two weren't, but they were living here legally. So I don't know...
What about closing off the borders to all countries that have extreme Islamist ideas?
No, that is nakedly collected punishment.
Well, Obama did that.
There are very good...
Your hero, Barack Obama,
Well, I don't know why you're saying he's my hero. There's nothing heroic about... There's nothing heroic about that guy who would send drones to kill people in Pakistan, OK? He's certainly not my hero.